press the record button now. I'm going to admit a few more people and hand over to Julian to get us started.
Thanks very much, Lisa. I was going to say good morning then. It's just about good afternoon. So really nice to see everybody. Thanks very much for giving up your time, if it's a lunchtime or just before lunch. As Lisa said, this session is on cultural engagement. So I'll do some intros in a moment, but let me just share my screen and give me a thumbs up, Lisa, that you can see that. Okay, and give me a thumbs up that the slides are moving. Brilliant. So here's this is me chairing the session today, doing a welcome, but really I'm doing a bit of context. But really the stars of today are our three case studies: Francine, Simon, and Hannah. And what we do in these sessions, we say a little bit about why this theme is important. So we have 5 broad themes, as I'll explain in a moment, in our social responsibility strategy. Today is about cultural engagement. And we really like to bring things to life, to give practical, tangible, real-world examples of things we're doing, and to ensure that you see social responsibility as something that staff at all levels in the organisation are undertaking in different ways. So I think we've got some fantastic examples today. I'm going to, in a few minutes, pass over to Francine. But Francine, did you want to say, just give everybody a wave and say hello? You might be on mute.
1 second. Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Francine Hayfren. You can call me Fran, and I am the cultural part keeper at the Whitworth Art Gallery.
Yep, so we'll be hearing about 5 or 6 minutes from Francine is our first case study in a few minutes' time. Simon, did you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Indeed, I will. Hi, my name is Simon Ruding. I am director of TIP, and I'll talk more about what that is as we get into the session.
You will. Thanks a lot, Simon. So Simon will also present for 5 or 6 minutes on TIP in a moment, and then Hannah from the Manchester Museum.
Hello, everybody. I'm Hannah. I'm the Environmental Action Manager at Manchester Museum.
Thank you very much, Hannah. So they're the real stars of the show. I'll just give you a little bit of context and then we'll hear from them. And as Lisa said, we will do a quick evaluation at the end, just 2 simple questions we ask you. So you've all seen this to death, I'm sure, the onion, as we call it, the university strategy, but the lilac bits are our 3 core goals. I can't stress this enough because people tell us this all around the world when we meet with them. The social responsibility goal is still unique in British higher education. No other university has that commitment as one of its core goals. And it's something we're really proud of at Manchester and is really informing when we're thinking about the next chapter for our strategy up to 2035 is coming out as a really distinctive feature of the university. We have, like with research and teaching, we have a plan that sits within that onion, a plan for social responsibility and civic engagement, and it runs up to the summer of 2025. And in that plan, there are these 5 big themes. Now, today we're talking about cultural engagement, but we also have plans around social inclusion, prosperous communities, better health, and environmental sustainability. Now, the interesting thing about today's session, which has a focus on cultural engagement, is that you'll realise these are not mutually exclusive. In other words, when you listen to Simon in a moment, you'll understand the social inclusion is absolutely key to the way in which we're thinking about culture. Or when you listen to what Hannah says or Francine, you'll see that cultural engagement is allowing us to think about new ways, new audiences, new methods of engaging people with the climate crisis and with the nature crisis and environmental sustainability, or in Francine's case, also around better health. So these are not mutually exclusive, but today's focus is on cultural engagement. So they're the 5 themes of the strategy. When we think about where this strategy takes place, you'll hear about things that happen on our campus or around our campus, like things are happening in the museum or at the Whitworth, what our students are doing. You'll see things are happening around the Oxford Road corridor. Some things happen in the city of Manchester, where Bev Craig is the leader of Manchester City Council. You'll see things are happening at Greater Manchester level, where Andy Burnham is the mayor of Greater Manchester. Other things happen beyond this in the wider northwest. Into the nation and around the world, indeed. The strategy for social responsibility and civic engagement, clearly the civic engagement aspect is local as well as global. If we had Jodrell Bank on it today, they might argue we go into outer space. They literally listen to the Big Bang on a daily basis. So at every spatial level, the university is making an impact. Underpinning those 5 priorities, partners, people and processes are key. We really want to engage staff, students, alumni and the public. We do more when we work in partnership with people than we can achieve alone. So partnerships are always key. And we also have a big focus on our processes. It sounds a bit boring, but where would we be unless we had a focus, unless we measured the impact of what we do, unless we communicated what we did and celebrated our work? So we spend a lot of time on these 3 Ps. We also think another P about our performance. Now, this is something, if you take away a message today, we are the only university in the world to perform in the way that we do. And we measure our performance around, first of all, one measure to be in the top 2% of universities in the world for impact against those 17 global goals, the SDGs, and another one around being in the top decile for performance against the knowledge exchange framework. So just very quickly, with respect to the Sustainable Development Goals, these are the world's goals. If you wanted an action plan for the world, much bigger than what Keir Starmer's doing or what Duncan Iverson is doing, there's a strategy for the whole world. These are the UN SDGs. There's 17 of them. And they describe what the planet and people need to thrive by 2030. And there's a ranking that assesses our universities meeting those democratically agreed goals around the world. And we're in not just the top 2%, which is the target, we're in the top 0.09% at the moment. We are second in the world, top in Europe, top in the UK for this ranking. And you can see our position over the past 6 years. We're the only university in the world that stayed in that top 10 over this period of time. So it's a remarkable performance. And the examples of activity you'll be seeing today directly feed into this on a number of different levels. We also are judged in relation to our public and community engagement. So we are, they do them in quintiles now rather than deciles, and we are in that top quintile for public and community engagement as well. And the examples you hear today are really good examples of public and community engagement. So that's just a bit of context. Just to say, in terms of cultural engagement, a bit like the banks, we have the big 4, our cultural institutions, if you like, the Manchester Museum, the Whitworth, John Rylands, and Jodrell Bank Centre for Engagement. As well as those 4 cultural institutions, we have this thing called Creative Manchester. Creative Manchester are absolutely key. They wanted to be here today to present, but both the 2 key people are tied up presenting something else. But Creative Manchester is something that if you don't know much about Creative Manchester, Lisa will put a link in the chat. You should sign up to their newsletters. You get invited to the coolest events in the university if you're on their mailing list. They also have a number of partnerships. So probably the most engaged part of the university in terms of strategic partnerships around culture and creativity. So you are going to hear from 2 of our cultural institutions alongside Simon. So that just leaves me. So Francine, we're going to hand over to you first. I'm going to do the slides. So just give me the Chris Whitty style next slide, please. And I'm happy to press them. And if you can do it in 5 or 6 minutes, Francine, I know you've got some beautiful pictures as well. I'll hand over to you. So introduce yourself again and fire away. And we'll do questions at the end. We'll go Francine, then Simon, then Hannah. So Francine, please, over to you.
Okay, there we go. Start again. Hello, everyone again. I'm Francine Hayfront, who is a cultural park keeper at the Whitworth. Essentially, it's a lovely grand title, but essentially what I do is I am responsible for the outdoor programme at the Whitworth. And so basically, next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so I thought it would be most appropriate to talk about our 4 main outdoor spaces at the Whitworth that we maintain. And in this picture, the slide that you can see is our wonderful art garden. We have 3 other spaces as well, which include the Alex Bernstein Garden, the Community Garden, and the Sculpture Terrace, and of course, the wider remit of Whitworth Park. And within these 4 spaces is where a lot of our activity takes place. The art garden that you can see here, this was created within the capital development project that happened at the Whitworth when we reopened 2014, 2015. And the reason why I just bring this space to your attention in particular, because this beautiful space was created also by participants within our outdoor programme. So I'll talk a little bit about it in a minute, but one of our programmes is called Grow. It's a horticultural wellbeing programme. And within that programme, all the participants were able to work alongside the wonderful designer, Sarah Price, who you may be familiar with her or heard her name, as she's won several Chelsea gold medals for her garden design. But it was a really special moment as our volunteers and participants on the Grow programme were able to work alongside Sarah to help create this wonderful space. So there's lots of ownership amongst that space as well, amongst the participants, and it's great for them to, you know, see it 10, 11 years on, how it's still growing and thriving. I mentioned the Alex Bernstein Garden as well, which is a lovely little enclosed space that can be accessed from within the building, and the community garden space, which I'll talk about a bit more, which we've been working on pretty much since 2019, and then obviously since COVID in 2020, and the sculpture terrace, which is located outside the front of the building, but has lots of lovely planted areas and kind of leads on seamlessly to the park. That's another space. So I have colleagues that I work with in the gallery who primarily is their job to focus on these spaces, but then we have lots of opportunity for volunteers, visitors to the gallery, but also wider staff across the university to come and get stuck in and help us maintain these spaces. And also, I mustn't forget to add that within the wider scope of Whitworth Park, we also have our collection in there as well. So there are artworks situated in the park. I think roughly at the minute we have about 12 of them that are out there. So, and this is also obviously part of our collections as well. So that work is not just happening indoors, it's obviously extending outside within the park as well. So this slide that you can see here talks about the Natural and Cultural Health Service, which is one of our core, main core programmes on the outdoor programme. Natural and Cultural Health Service was piloted in 2019, and it was our trial at really kind of doing our own social prescription programme. So it's using the park that we have, Whitworth Park, the natural asset outdoors, to help people improve their physical and mental well-being as well. So within this programme, Natural and Cultural Health Service, we also do have these lovely little booklets which you can pick up in the gallery. But basically the programme aims to engage individuals with nature and the outdoors, helping to improve physical and mental well-being, as I've said before. We divide the programme into 3 areas, which is around green well-being, physical well-being, and arts for good health. And then within those kind of 3 key areas, we look at 5 different health streams, which are centered around dementia, long COVID and respiratory, menopause, mental health and well-being, and also prostate cancer. Now, when we decided to look at these 5 health streams, and I must stress at the very beginning, of course, we are an art gallery, so we do work within our remit and work within partners. We're not saying that we have the answers for all health and social care, but it's about using this engagement, which has been recognised to get outside in the outdoors and which can help to improve along these 5 health streams. So we've done a lot of work over the years around dementia, and our partners at Manchester Museum, and particularly a colleague of mine, Wendy Gallagher, who left a very great legacy with us. Long COVID and respiratory came about, obviously, as this programme really came into full effect during COVID and during the pandemic. And obviously outdoors was one of the spaces that we could actually get outside. And we spoke to lots of participants in the programme during and after, and definitely long COVID has had significant impacts on people. So this is why we decided to focus one of our health streams around that. A lot of the research shows to just get outside in the outdoors, whether it's gardening or just walking. And so this is why we have decided to focus. This is one of our health streams. Menopause, we've been doing a lot of great work around menopause, and there is much more to come. One of my colleagues, Claire Cowell, who heads our age-friendly programme, has developed a really great programme around creative menopause. I know I'm running out of time, sorry, so I'm going to try it and speed up. Apologies. You can find out more information anyway about Natural and Cultural Health Service. Please just contact me. This slide here, I just wanted to show, is a community garden, which is an area that we've been working on a lot since 2020. And within the community garden space, it allows us to work with other local grassroots organisations and people within the community. So this group here are from the Cornerstone Hostel, which is based on Denmark Road. And we did a project with them for over a period of 6 months, talking about how food grows, really, poetry and food. The next slide here is a project we did with young people as well, Park Pioneers. So that allows us to develop young people into thinking about outdoor arts and engagement outdoors, whether that's around health and well-being or kind of cultural instances. And this slide here is from our famous biannual, I say famous, well known within the university anyway, our biannual festival, which is called the Frost Fair, which is a great celebration of winter really and us coming together. And here is the art garden again, which can double up as a very intimate outdoor cinema. So there's lots of different ways in which we can use our spaces. And this last slide here was during our bicentenary event, the Carnival, and it's another great project which we can use within the outdoors. So we worked very closely with colleagues and Professor Duncan Cameron to look at the soil project, which is working with people basically to let them know what is underneath the soil and how important soil is to us. So we're hoping to continue with this work, but that was a really kind of quick fly across all the different things and activities that we do at the Whitworth.
Amazing. Thank you, Francine. I mean, there's so much in that. I hope people can see that in terms of a cultural organisation, if you think of the Whitworth as being a gallery and art, if you've not been there for a while, of course, that's one of its main functions, it still is. But the park, I think, is such an asset and it's being used in so many creative ways, and I think can continue to be used. I mean, we can really dream big about what we can do in the future in this park with the right type of funding and partnership. So Francine, thanks so much for that. And people may have questions. If you've got a question, just jot it down or mentally note it and you can ask Francine a question at the end. So I'm now going to hand over for the next 5 or 6 minutes to Simon. Simon, introduce yourself. I think this is a really interesting, just the fact that Simon's here, it's got an interesting status within the university because essentially TIP is something that has an interesting relationship. It is and isn't part of the university. It's based in the university, but it's also independent. So Simon, explain a bit about TIP and also some of the work we've been doing over the past few decades, really. But I think you'll be surprised. And I think this is really a great example of how we're thinking about teaching and learning in students and how our learning objectives can be used as a force for good using culture. So Simon, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Julian. Yeah, so anybody who knows me knows that sort of 5 or 6 minutes is a sort of evil straitjacket to get me to kind of try and fill. Tip defies definition on an elevator pitch, so I'm going to try and touch upon some of the key things that are important to us and important to this meeting today over the next 5 minutes or so. So TIP was established originally as a research and development centre in drama way back in 1991. Actually, I was thinking, is that way back compared to the Whitworth? I don't think it is. I think we're a junior here, certainly in terms of the three of us on the panel, in terms of our organisations. And we were set up by somebody who may well be known to people here, Professor James Thompson, and a colleague of his, Paul Heritage, who is currently and has been head of drama down in London for quite a long time. We're university based. We are based within the Martin Harris Centre, and we deliver the first and longest running undergraduate course in prison theatre practice. I'm going to come back to that later, but I like to always pitch that out there first in this context. Our work originated within the criminal justice system, primarily delivering theatre-based participatory work within the prison and probation service, hence our name, TIP. TIP, as some of you will know, was an acronym for the Theatre in Prisons and Probation Research and Development Centre. We only go by TIP now, and again, I think that will become clear as to the reason why as I continue talking. I do also want to say, it was probably seen on the first slide there, that we were finalists a couple of weeks back in the Manchester Cultural Awards in the Made in Manchester category, and actually we won that. So we are the 2024 winners of the Manchester Cultural Award Made in Manchester category, which I am very proud of. So our work, well, we engage with people who are away from the mainstream. We work within the context of the criminal justice system with people who've offended or people who are at risk of offending or in some context, are otherwise socially disenfranchised. Groups that typically people will say, or they'll be really hard to work with. They're a challenging group to work with. We see that as a challenge to find ways of working with those people. Mostly, we're working with people who have had limited engagement with the arts and culture as makers. We're all surrounded by the arts and culture, but we're talking about bringing people into the core of our practice as makers. We work alongside partner organisations, and we look to form lots of relationships to make that happen. We have to. We work in partnership with Manchester Youth Justice Service. We work with the prison service. We work with individual prisons. We work with probation. But our main, and our primary partner is the university. And again, I'm going to come back to that. And while our roots are in theatre, we do way, way more than theatre. You might be able to tell from those images that are up there on the slide that we do everything from visual arts to sculpture to film to knitting, anything that works to engage people in creative activity, anything that helps people achieve and make something and progress and change the story of their lives. But I should acknowledge that one of the major corners of our work is music. And it's grown in importance and in prominence in our programme over the last 15 years. And we started with a very strong relationship with drama as a subject area, and now do an awful lot of teaching and delivery within music as well. Because we've always been based in the university, we've got a really evolved academic mindset, and that sits within our high quality practice, I believe. And that makes the company quite unique as a creative arts organisation, that relationship and how we thrive off it and work with it. We work really closely. We collaborate with academics from criminology, from sociology. We work in health. We work in nursing. We work in social care training. And we also have a long-standing and deep relationship with applied arts research at the university. Our own staff undertake their own research. My PhD was undertaken here. Our music director, Rachel, is currently towards hers. And a couple of other staff members were graduates of the department, either as undergraduates or postgrads. Research is really, really important to us. And it directly influences the development of our practice and our work. And for me, that's something that makes our work quite unique. And the social outcomes that come from that are obviously really well assessed and documented and published. Now, running alongside our commitment to that research and creative development and working with people, actually at the core of what we do, we offer practical training to artists and to undergraduates and postgraduates. And there is one really famous graduate who talks about this quite frequently. I bought a copy of a magazine. I don't know. If I'm on the screen here? This was the I think he's called Mr. Cumberbatch. I'm not quite sure, but he did our course back in the 90s. And indeed, in that article in the university magazine, he talks about going into prison and the work that he did. The nature of the work challenges artists and students. It's great. It's a practical engagement that promotes self-exploration and development. It's not just about doing work on a stage. Is going out into institutions and working in them. So we've just completed 2 weeks worth of residencies with final year drama students, 20 students who've been working in 6 different prisons across the region, delivering week-long creative arts programs to men and women in prisons. It develops their creative practice, and it develops the practice and learning of the participants equally to the students. We've got a whole bunch of projects going on. I'm conscious of my time, so I'm going to most towards the end. We have a prison-based program that is the start of a 3-year program which is working with men and women in recovery from substance misuse. That's NHS England funded. I'm just thinking here, Julian, about your thing about interdisciplinary routes. So this is about health and well-being, that funding that is funding that work. We have a long-standing relationship with Manchester Youth Justice, where we have recording studios established in two of their offices, in Central Office and in Longsight Office. We work in probation activity hubs across the Northwest and across into Yorkshire and Humber. And we also have a railway station. If you use Deansgate railway station at any point in your journeys in and out of the city, look at the artwork which is up there. We have adopted the railway station as a site to engage in conversation with the public about the work that we do with young people and adults in the justice system. And currently there are several large images scattered around the station. Scattered makes it sound random. They're actually permanently fixed around the station, which were photographs of Manchester street art, and the photographs were taken by young people on one of our community programs with youth justice. That station is going to slowly be filled with other artwork, and we're about to do some artwork again, working with people in the youth justice system at the side of Oxford Road Railway Station. Students are involved in all of these programs, either as volunteers or as recent graduates, or not so much students, but recent graduates who are using work with us as a stepping stone into a career in practice. So our relationship with the university is a critical part of our existence. And I hope that in terms of what we do, we are feeding very much into the health and well-being of the university and its kind of desires to achieve the social outcomes that Julian mentioned earlier. That's it. I could go on for another 10 minutes, so I'm going to stop now.
Thanks, Simon. No, I really appreciate being so succinct with that, because there's so much in what TIP does over a number of decades now. I think this is something that literally has been going more than 30 years, and is something that people who are aware of this work are really proud of. And I think the recent endorsement by Benedict Cumberbatch, that's the one thing he really remembers about his undergraduate experience, was going into a prison. Of course you would. These are life-changing experiences. The interesting thing about Simon's work with students and using culture is that it's a really good example of something that globally we call service learning. This is where students obviously have learning needs, they have learning objectives. So you might need to be able to undertake a particular form of creative practice. But can you learn that, but whilst also at the same time creating social benefit? That's what service learning is. It starts with a real need in the community, with the needs of students. And if you think of a Venn diagram, what students need to learn, what the world needs, where that crosses over, that's where service learning happens. And it's a great example of what Simon's been doing, as well as, our legal advice centre. You've got dentists going into communities. We've got business studies students doing consultancy projects with not-for-profits. This is what we call service learning. And it's very likely this is going to come out as a major theme in the 2035 process. So it's a wonderful example, Simon, of something that the whole university might be trying to do. Whether it can do it in the same depth, I probably doubt it. This is something that is really time consuming and is like a Rolls-Royce version of service learning, but it's certainly a benchmark for many people. So thanks, Simon. And again, any questions, please save them up for Simon in a moment. And Hannah, if you can just spend 5 minutes now, I'll do the slides talking about the Manchester Museum and its work it's doing on sustainability, using our status as a really busy, well-attended cultural organisation in the city, the Natural History Museum of our city, using that as a way to engage with citizens, but also with local NGOs on issues of sustainability. So Hannah, over to you, please.
Thanks, Julian. So just bear with me, I'm a little bit congested. I'm kind of mid-cold at the moment. So if I sound a bit nasal, that's why. So yeah, as I mentioned, my name's Hannah. I'm the Environmental Action Manager at Manchester Museum. Our mission statement is building understanding between cultures and a more sustainable world. So I work across both of those goals really, but sit more under the more sustainable world bit and really trying to understand what exactly we mean by that and how we work towards it. So on the slide there, I've just included a bit of a definition of how we think and talk about environmental action. So this is partly about how we move people towards sustainability behaviours and practices, and obviously obviously the goal of kind of becoming a more low carbon and low waste society, supporting the university's own strategy in this area as well. But given the kind of unique position we hold sort of in the city and the collections that we hold, we have a real opportunity also to do work around rebuilding and repairing our connections with the natural world, and particularly that kind of idea of kinship with more than human beings, and thinking beyond sustainability as well. And museums are really, I could go on forever about the role of museums within this, but museums are great places to help people kind of imagine different ways of being and using the past to kind of inform the future. So thinking about moving beyond sustainability and towards more regenerative practices. My role is about 2.5 years old. I'm also joined by a social justice manager, Chloe Cousins, who kind of mirrors my role. We work really closely together, and our roles are both outward facing in terms of building relationships outside of the museum and the university, but also internal as well. So next slide, please, Julian. Just to really briefly mention the Roots and Branches project. So this is kind of what supported my role to kind of come online and exist. We've just uploaded an evaluation report onto our website, so you can take a look at that. But some of the kind of great outputs of that project have been supporting museums across England through developing a carbon literacy for museums toolkit. And it also really supported our work to kind of interrogate more closely what the museum's role should and could be in terms of local climate action, and delivering a kind of programme of different intersectional and particularly artist-led events. A lot of you will know that the museum just reopened in February 2023. So in the past kind of 18 months, there's been a real period of just testing and piloting different things. As part of that as well, we have our Climate Cafe programme. So this is part of a kind of growing area of work that I'm really interested in terms of building people's resilience, thinking about the kind of state of the world and the eco-anxiety that a lot of people are experiencing. So the Climate Cafes are a space for that. And we've just launched our student focused programme of that. So yeah, please encourage students to join that. And the main hub for all of this work is our top floor space. So this is really a community-centred space used by a whole range of different individuals and groups working across the city, both around those values of social justice, but also environmental action. And if you go on to the next slide, Julian, there's a couple of different groups here who we're working with. So Ardwick Climate Action are really engaged and long-standing partner, both of the university, but also within the museum. We've done a whole range of work with them. So I'll pop a link into the chat. We have a case study on our website. Grassroots movements are a new CIC doing work with and for marginalised people, breaking down barriers to urban and green spaces. They're just embarking on a social responsibility funded project looking at migration and access to green space. And then finally, Black Girls Hike. So they are providing safe spaces and encouraging Black women to take up space in the outdoors. And they're going to be in our partner space in the Wild exhibition. So the Wild exhibition is on until the 1st of June 2025. We're about halfway through. It's been running for a year. What it's about really is exploring concepts of wild, rewilding and wildness. But I think particularly just to mention, it's really unpicking wildness and our conception of that as being very rooted in a sort of Western worldview. So part of our aim with that exhibition is to introduce different local and global perspectives to sort of broaden our understanding of that. And there's a list there of a bunch of different partners through the top floor and kind of through our wider work with community climate action and social enterprises. We've really tried to focus on bringing them into that space as well. And alongside that project, we've been running something called Belonging Wild, which has been working with young neurodivergent and young deaf people to really kind of look at different multisensory understandings and engagement with the natural world. So thinking about how nature is kind of experienced and accessed now by people with those lived experiences, and what we can kind of do to support a wider audience to understand that and inspire action for being more inclusive in terms of how we think about our wild futures. So there's a few ways that visitors to the museum can engage with that. We have a residency running at the moment. You can drop in on Wednesdays to meet the artists, and we're planning a big event in March as well. So lots more on all of that on our website. I'll put up a couple of links in the chat, and you can look out, keep on our newsletter, look at what's coming up at the museum for opportunities to engage with that project as well.
Thank you very much, Hannah. So that's our 3 presentations. What we're going to do now, I'm going to unshare the slides and open it up. And thank you very much. So please, over to colleagues, and I'm just going to catch up with the chat. So yeah, some really nice comments about from Emma. Thank you about the Whitworth outdoor spaces, and some links that Lisa's put in for further information. We're a reasonably small group, so you're welcome to shout out or put your hand up and I'll try and notice you. If I don't notice you, please just shout out though. So hands up or shout out, happy either way. And let's open it up for any questions or comments, whether that's to Francine, Simon or Hannah, or indeed to all of them if it's a general point. So please, over to you. I don't believe you're this shy, so I'll give you a few more seconds. Come on. If nobody's going to ask a question, I might ask one first then. Just in terms of, just for all of you really, in terms of the role of culture, what would you say to people that think culture doesn't really fit into the University of Manchester? We're a science-based university. What's all this culture stuff we're doing? What would you say to that? Because that's a perception some people give to us from the perspective of outside the university. They think about splitting the atom, they think about the computer, they think about graphene. Would they come to culture? So any of you got any thoughts on that? To our panelists. Go on, Simon.
Look, culture's always formed quite a strong part of what the university offer is, I think. Even in the days before the opening of the drama department, which I think was in 1961, there was very active societies and student union creating theatre, creating performance. I'm talking about obviously from my art form perspective here, and I think a part of the more kind of general offer to students that come here is that very particular cultural pull of the city. So we're reflecting in our practice the extraordinary culture of Manchester. It would be a misunderstanding to anticipate that that it is simply the sciences alone which bring people to the city or to the university. And indeed, I think all 3 of us here probably are working interdisciplinary across into areas of science and social engagement. It's not just cultural offer, it is a broader offer that culture touches upon and includes.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. I think that's right. We want to give, particularly for our students and our visitors, Manchester wouldn't be the city it is without culture, and the university reflects that. And the idea of this separation between culture and science is a bit of a false dichotomy. In any case, many of our most famous scientists at the university would talk about the importance of creativity and innovation and new forms of partnerships, new ways of thinking, new ways to engage people. And culture offers not just an end in itself, it's something it's important to being human, but it's also a means to an end also for many people who undertake scientific practice. So it's both of those things. It is an end in itself, of course it is culture, but it's also a means for engagement for many people. So great, we've got a bit of a few other questions this has prompted. So I'm going to go to Alex and then to Neil. So Alex, please.
Thanks ever so much, Julian. I guess this is more of a practical question. So, we've just been funded by the National Institute of Health Research to be one of 9 consortia looking at maternity inequalities, which is something that sadly we experience in Greater Manchester, partly because we've got such an ethnically and socially diverse population.
Which area are you in, Alex?
So I'm based at St Mary's.
Yeah.
But actually, the consortium that we've put together is across the whole of Greater Manchester.
Yeah.
And I guess it's a question about how do we, so this is a 5-year program, and it's how do we actually tap into some of these amazing resources that could actually enable us to better interact with those traditionally underserved communities, because I think you've made a really important point that, or Simon made a really important point that arts and culture are a route for those of us who are in biomedicine to actually reach out to communities that don't come to us in traditional routes.
Yep. I think
and I think I guess it's a practical question about, well, how do we, when we get something like this, we've got a 5-year window of funding, how do we start those conversations with people who are like, unfortunately, I am a biomedic and I've got the creativity of a brick. So how do we start those conversations?
But fear not, Alex. So I think you're in the position that many people, and particularly where the funding is, a lot of creative and cultural practitioners have recognised that particularly the NHS is one of the few parts of the budget that was reasonably protected, not as much as it should have been, of course, but compared to other cuts in austerity. So cultural practitioners are very good at tapping into things like NIHR and other health forms of funding. And there's a whole movement actually around arts and health, which you may or may not be aware of, Alex, but certainly for Francine and Simon and Hannah, they're really always doing work with health practitioners. So just a really practical thing. We can put you in touch with Francine, Simon and Hannah afterwards. We'll also put you in touch with John McAuliffe from Creative Manchester, who's actually leading on a project all around arts and health. And there will certainly, particularly with these long-standing programs of work like you describe, Alex, there's a huge opportunity. So yeah, we'll follow that up as a really practical thing. But it's a great example of the benefits of these sessions to make some of those connections. So we'll definitely follow that up by email, and I'll put you in touch with a few colleagues. And then Neil, please, Neil Chamberlain. Hi, Neil.
Hi, thanks, Julian. Yeah, just to respond to the question, I think I would imagine we all agree culture is tremendously important as something the university can help to grow and stimulate in our communities. And I think all 3 examples today I've genuinely found inspiring and great to hear that this work is happening. I was just going to ask really all 3 speakers if they, what for them is success that they've seen in the 3 different projects they're working with. How does that manifest? It's working well.
So if you can do 3 panelists, if you can give us 30 seconds, give us one thing, and it might be rather than what's the most impactful thing ever, give us something that's happened in the last year. You thought, wow, this is how I do my job. This change, or this person said this, or saw that outcome. Try and give us something inspirational in no particular order for the 3 of you. Whoever's first, just something from the last year, maybe, because you have such cracking examples always when I speak to you all.
I'll go first then.
Yeah.
So mine is just something that I've seen. So, for example, and it always happens during our outdoor events, large outdoor events, but particularly Bicentenary Festival this year. I think when I just look around at the audience as they're in the park and in the building, the diversity is unbelievable. And that shows me that by using our green space outside to welcome people in, that shows me that we're doing something right. We want to reflect the locality where we live, and show that through the people coming through the doors and engaging with us. And I see this when I see our outdoor events, people who live across the road or whatever. That for me shows us that we're doing something right.
It's a great example, Francine. That's so important to the university. We want our culture to be accessible rather than elitist. And I think we do. If you look at the statistics on what the Whitworth and the museum are doing, it's unbelievable, actually, the local postcode areas and how we are reflecting it in ways that museums in London, frankly, don't. And I think that's something we're really proud of. So great example, Francine. Hannah, Simon, anything?
I would just, yeah, I suppose. I mean, the numbers of people showing up to the museum since we reopened probably speak to this. You know, we've had more than 1 million visitors, which is over double anything we had in a kind of full year pre-COVID. And I think, you know, when Julian touched there on the demographics and looking at the data of who those people are, you know, we've had about 12% of those people coming who are reporting that they've never been to a museum before. We've also seen, you know, a huge increase in engagement from communities who now feel like they see themselves represented in the museum and it's a space for them, as a result of the work we've done with particularly the South Asian diaspora communities in Manchester and the Chinese communities. But just in terms of the top floor, I think personally a big kind of success moment for me was our first Meet the Changemakers event, where we really looked to kind of open up that space I was talking about and bring in a whole range of different people who are doing that social change work in Manchester and introduce them to a really broad audience just through a kind of fun day of activities. And the feedback from that was so positive, but also for those groups, just the feedback from them of having those opportunities, you know, the people who are kind of trying to bring those services into Manchester to talk to a really broad range of members of the public and build those connections. And between them as well. So a big success story around the top floor has just been, for example, Ardwick Climate Action now working in partnership with the Clean Cities campaign. They never met before. So we're also kind of facilitating that kind of interconnectedness as well.
Thanks, Hannah. Great examples there. Simon, give us some little bit of what you've got.
Okay, I'm going to do two. I'm going to treat this a little bit. I'm going to do two. So, firstly, a student who came in to me last week who said to me, after having worked in the prison for a week the previous week, that it was the most meaningful experience they'd had whilst they'd been a student at the university, and it had changed their perspective on what they could do and what the arts could do. So that on a kind of immediate level. But I'm also minded to think about something from one of the participants on a project over the summer, and we're working in substance abuse recovery context in prison. And he said to us at the end of the project, now bear in mind he's in prison, he said to us that from the second day of the project to the end of the project, he had not taken any drugs. Okay, now that for me is working towards helping somebody change their life story. He didn't feel the need to abuse drugs for 4 days whilst he was on a creative arts project because he found meaning in it. And we have countless stories like that. I'm not saying that what we do or interventions like what we do are the kind of cure-all for everything. And I suspect very much that within a couple of weeks, when the regime got its teeth back into him, he will have been back using drugs again. But hearing that means, and him experiencing that means that it's a beginning of a changing story for him.
Brilliant example. Thanks very much, Simon. Just conscious of time, it's a shame we've only got the time we've got because I think there's so many good examples, but we do need to just wrap up in a moment. Just to say, first thing to say is we've got a few other sessions happening. If you enjoyed this one, we've got a couple on public engagement. They're repetitious ones. They're the same, but we wanted to put two on. If you're interested in how, why, what ways we engage the public more broadly in terms of our strategy as a university, come along to that. And if you're interested in better health, so Alex, it might be another interesting one for you, for example, more broadly, what's our Faculty of Biology, Medicine and Health doing and thinking when it thinks about being socially responsible? Please feel free to come along to that as well. Do feel free to get in touch with me personally. But Lisa, I think I'm correct in saying one thing we want to do just before we finish up is if you can answer, just click on a couple of simple questions which are embedded within Zoom. So Lisa, if you can flash those up, and we use these to make sure that when we come to do these sessions again in the future, we look at them. So yeah, if you can just say whether you learned something new today about social responsibility and civic engagement that you didn't otherwise know. Hopefully you did. That's the whole point of these, but you might not, and that's important. So tell us that. And also, how today's session encouraged you to do something different? Now, that might be just you want to find something out, you want to email somebody, you want to follow something up, look at a web link, speak with somebody else. Will you do something different? That's important, a bit of action out of these as well. And number 3, just any other comments as well. So please, if you didn't mind, just a few seconds doing that. We don't want a lot of stuff, but it's really good to get that quick poll feedback. So thanks very much on that. And then I think the last thing I wanted to say is thank you very much to our speakers. Francine, Simon, Hannah, you really bring this to life. Like many people said in the comments, it makes me really proud to work at a university where people like you are my colleagues, and that you're doing the work that you do with the sensitivity and care and professionalism. I think part of our strategy for social responsibility, of course, is to have impact on society, addressing these really big challenges we have around things like inequality and the climate crisis, the nature crisis, some of our health challenges. And just seeing how cultural engagement, as we said at the beginning, is not separate to these, is an absolutely important vehicle, not just in broader society, but through the University of Manchester. We have these amazing cultural institutions, and we need to protect them and keep funding them as we do. They are real assets of the university. And hopefully today's session has brought some of those things to life, how important they are, and how cultural organisations embedded within the university, of which Simon Tip is an example, but we have more. We have In Place of War, we have Manchester Histories, as well as examples of cultural organisations based within the university that are spun out of academic ideas, and which we hold on to really proudly as a university. And even though they have to become independent in many cases to access different forms of funding and do different types of work. So Simon, Francine, Hannah, thank you ever so much. And thanks to all the participants as well. I thought it was an excellent session. So we've all got 5 minutes back before 1 o'clock. There you go. That was my aim. Thank you very much for tuning in, and do come along to other sessions in the future. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julian.
Thanks a lot, Francine, Simon, Hannah. That's brilliant. Thanks, everyone. Who's okay? You can stop recording.
Yeah.